This is an open letter to friends and family. There is this guy I know, a recent is the last one that recently used the following phrase: "Hey, dude," to me. It's the last in a chain of the same phrase being expressed to me. This is the last one who used it, and there has been many before him, in other words. And the line of thought or the line of conversation is like, hey man, I know you don't believe in God, but I do, so I wouldn't do that to you or anybody else. Or I wouldn't do that because I believe in God. Basically, one is trying to say that because I believe in something that you don't, that makes me that much farther from falsehood. That means, I'm on the truth side. Basically saying because believing in God is the truth, and anybody who doesn't believe in God is closer to false. So if I do believe in this God, so I'm closer to the truth, and the other guy who doesn't believe in this God is farther away from this truth. So he must be wrong, and I must be right. Well, yeah, of course, this has been. I have been on the other side of this conversation many places in the world. I've heard it from the Muslims. I've heard it from the Hindus. I've heard it from Christians. I heard it from almost everybody. It's the whole back to the idea. I have the best penis. My penis is the best penis. My God is the best God. This, and it's not necessarily. Uh, First of all, it's not necessarily true because we know the followers of all these gods have whatever God you call your God. You know that history is full of people who really believed in God and really did really bad shit, or they consider themselves believe what God? Which one? The God of Aztecs, or the God of the Mayans, the God of the Chickasaw, or the God of the Hindu, or the God of the Muslims? Which God? There are many. So had every tribe. You see, Jesus came to a tribe in Middle East. You know, you can't have a same person all in every tribe. Believe me, in every tribe they had their Jesus. It's just that the tribe was too small, or they were defeated in a few wars, and suddenly their big God was a small God. But the concept of God has always been around because human beings feel much better if they believe there's somebody up there watching, because temptations are all there, and in order to go through temptations and not be tempted, is it's better you think there is a somebody watching you, or else we would we would not have got out of caves. We would have been so violent. You have to believe in some greater power in order to calm yourself down, or else we have the tendencies of animals. I mean, you give absolute power. I've seen a chicken devour a whole group of insects up to the last one, and even when the chicken was full, just continues slaughtering, and maybe eating half, or but as long as it's there, it kills itself on food. So that doesn't believe in chicken, doesn't believe in God. There is no God concept in chickens. So if you give chicken, if dinosaurs come back, we have no chance because they didn't have a God. So yeah, human beings, the way the psychology has been organized, the way the brain has been organized, you have found that easier to form large groups if you feel you're under watch from God. And what is if what if God doesn't have any closed circuit cameras, but the state does in case of China. So China is exactly executing what you dream of in every religion, that there is a God who's watching. So what is the problem with Chinese government saying yes there is a God watching and we are providing this we are providing the closed circuit cameras for him. God is there. And we're just providing the means for God to control the fucking society. So, the closed circuit cameras of the the Chinese government has been the wet dreams of organized societies from the beginning of organized society. The whole idea of they have materialized God. Watch over everybody, take care of everybody, do whatever it has to be done in order to bring some kind of a order to the disorder and growth, hopefully. Yeah, if you need to believe in something as human beings. Yes, please go be my guest. Believe in God, believe in, call it Krishna and Gita and Mita and Sita and you know uh, Moses and Jesus as Muhammad and Sahandan. Doesn't matter. Every tribe has had a god from the beginning. That's how they have been able to create bigger corporations. Just hoping that everybody agrees on this concept that you're being watched all the time. So do the right thing. Well, you can do that, but then once you recognize coexistence in a society depends on you doing the right thing. Once you recognize that, then because you don't want to be an outcast of the society, you automatically don't do it. You don't need to believe in somebody else is watching you if you understand the concept of coexistence in the society. What I mean is that both uh, Jeff Bezos, kind of figureheads, have to understand that piling up money in order to make you know profit on profit, while the children of the society are not being taught enough in school and all the money is going towards weaponry and war, then that he hasn't understood the concept of coexistence, as in like you have to bring about an educated society if you want more educated than their parents, if you want to continue the civility. This is the understanding of the coexistence. That the very rich in the society and these, almost monopolies, almost duopolies and triopolies and quadropolies, but there are very few hands amassing so much wealth, while the children of the tribe, uh, you know, are not being educated, not being fed, many unhoused, whatever. And this comes about because nobody's watching. People have lost the pretend of somebody's watching, God is watching. Even that pretense has gone away. Well, the Chinese have brought that pretense to the reality and are watching and say, yeah, if you're a good citizen, we give you some points. If you're a bad citizen, we take away some points away from you. Isn't this what religion is all about? The big guy up there watching, so do the right thing. So the Chinese are saying, yeah, we are watching, so do the right thing. There is not much that difference, except what I'm trying to say is Uh, Once the concept is understood, that in order to be coexist in a large, very large tribe, you have to behave yourself, because that's the only way that large society can stick together. That civility business. That's the way large society can stick together, with true civility. But then capitalism gets in the way. That civility goes out of the window, because the money is not being returned into the society in order to educate the children of the society very well in civility, in history, you know, whatever. If you don't do that, if that doesn't take place, if the money is amassed into more profitable and profitable business, but the large number of those public schools are, not much is learned in them, because not much is invested in them. The pay for the teachers are so low that, for example, that only the very committed, or the very desperate find themselves in those jobs, just very, because it's very apparently low skilled. I'm not sure why teaching would be considered as low skilled. uh, but that's how you're running Earth right now. At least that's how Uncle Sam's managers are running their business. That the problem is, the very wealthy have, stepped off the path of somebody's watching. They no longer consider themselves as children. They don't believe in God, and they have, they should, they don't have to believe in God. They should be allowed to, believe in God or not. But the problem arises when the state is not watching either. The guy doesn't believe in God, and the state is not watching. Then nobody's watching. So this put a fear of God into them is basically the society's language in saying force civility onto them. Civility, fear of God are more or less the same thing, result into the same thing in the society. Either you are civilized, you understand to behave nicely in order to keep a cohesive society going, or be scared of God and behave nicely, so you can keep it coexisting, the society coexisting and moving forward. But in order to be the second one, as in like no God, without the use of God, people can still continue behaving well. For that, there is a lot of investment in education is needed. You see, Norway. I went to church on Sunday morning in Norway a few times. Nowhere did the traditional churches, the churches that the Norwegian went to. I found out the time, a few that did open, and I did go. What I found is that, uh, what I found was that, uh, including me, there were like 4 people in church. He was the guy in charge, and his assistant, maybe 2 or 3 people sitting, including me. But then when you go into society, you see people are very well behaved, very well behaved. So how is it that in Norway, where Norwegians have lost interest in God, but you still have a cohesive society going? That's because you're educating your population very well. You know, I didn't come across an uninformed N- Norwegians a lot. I didn't come across uninformed Norwegians a lot. I was there for a year. So more or less all very informed, speaking two, three languages, Norwegian and of course English and probably maybe Swedish or German. Swedish certainly, but German a little less. But Danish, a lot of, Norwegian, speaking Norwegian, Danish, and English, and probably something else. So that opens a lot of avenues, opens up a lot of avenues of knowledge. How much are you investing in education? As a society in North America, how much are you investing in education? Is it Uncle Sam's managers have decided to spend money in war, defense, than education? So if you're not going to civilize the people like the Norwegians through education, if you're not going to civilize them so they understand the benefits of living in a large cohesive society, if you haven't educated them to that degree, then you have to move to God, introduce them back to God. You see, either you go to the Norwegian way and you have to educate, so go towards create a cohesive society through learning, or you have to go the Chinese way of create this cohesive society through watching, either an imaginary God watching or the state watching. I think pretty soon those cameras in China is not going to be necessarily even, because if you can educate your people of your society to such a degree, educate with regards to history and art and math and science, and educate. That costs money, of course. You need to pay somebody to sit here somewhere and explain something, and you need to provide that environment, some incentives. You put people in debt for education. That desensitized, that's pushing people away from education because they go up to here in debt. Why do you need to enslave them? Enslave your own people through their education, making their education so expensive, and then enslave people overseas through warfare to the Sane Society. No, there is again, you can not have a God, believe in a God, but you can be civilized and understand the benefits of living in a cohesive society, so still be a average citizen. Or if you haven't, if you can have not been educated, at least people have to have the fear of God in order to behave civilly towards each other, so in a civilized manner towards each other. So as unfortunately the system in North America has failed with regards to education, and again, when I say education, I mean a lifelong education. Some people were a little, I went to college recently, spent a year in a technical college, just, for fun and for having something to do and learning something new, maybe becomes useful in the future. It was a refrigeration, teaching how refrigeration works, and eventually an HVAC a technician at the end of the course. So I did it. It was a year long course. When I signed up, I didn't know it was a year long. But hey, I thought it was like a 3 month business. But then it ended up being a year business. Anyway, but lifelong learning. This should be, free in terms of, less, you know, missiles and more pay for good teachers through taxes. The same money that is printed and missiles are built with it, that same money can go to the more teachers and more classrooms, learning environments. That's how you create a Norwegian society in which, although they don't believe in God, nobody rarely goes to church on Sunday morning, but still they have a very cohesive society. So you can achieve civility through education. If not, then you have to go back to God in order to force the society, you convince the society that they should be civil to each other. It's the thing, the wrong decisions are made because, a lot of money goes towards a lot of extracurricular activities such as war, when you can educate your public into civility so you don't have to go back to God. Fuck. But again, every time you neglect education in order to create some kind of cohesive society, you have to, if you haven't invested in education, in order to make your society work, you have to go back to God. Because a man without civil education is a chicken in relations with insects. He has no morals. He hasn't been educated enough to understand the benefits of a cohesive society. I mean, you know, I understand, I heard this on some news organization that Walton family, the owners of Walmart, almost a monopoly or duopoly or triopoly in in almost around the world. I think it's got the biggest number of stores around the world. Good for them, but not really, because apparently I read in the story that Walton family has built this great museum in some corner of Kansas or Arkansas or somewhere around there. They have built this great museum and bought these great artworks and brought them to this great museum. Okay, well, yes and no. Your people are not being educated. The society that you have your business in and you make your money, your wealth from, you spend that money building more buildings, not actually habitable buildings, but museums. Really? So our people are sleeping on the street and then visiting our stores to eat, buy their daily bread and go back to their life on the streets. But we see more benefit in building a museum in the middle of nowhere. Okay, middle of somewhere. That's not the point. The point is museums should not come before residential, or your people are housed, educated, healthy, that there is money left over for museums, there's money left over for war, there's money. I mean, you gotta, make make a Norwegian society in terms of educate people so much, well education, so well that they behave civilly. But you're spending all your money on war, blowing it, literally blowing it on war, but then your people, once over time they slowly lose their faith in somebody watching, there goes civility out the window. Civility, and I don't mean just the poor people being mean to rich people. I mean rich people being mean to poor people by having such a shitty public education. That's rich people being mean to poor people by accumulating the wealth and not understanding that society only works, because cohesive society only works if a lot of money put into education of the society. That's the only way a cohesive society works, or else you have to go fucking back to God. I'm sorry, this is I don't mean to be rude, because oh God, I've lost hearing on my left ear, more or less, because of God. Because somebody, I told them in a very rough, shitty environment. I told somebody that no, I called my God by something else, or I told him I don't believe in God, and suddenly he saw fit to take away the hearing of my on my left ear by means of uh, firing a gun very close to my ear. So I lost the hearing on my left ear. This was by somebody who to tell me that him being believing God, whatever he called it, that makes him closer to truth. Therefore, from a little closer than me to the truth, he saw fit to turn back and do this to me. You see, this is how you go towards the truth. The more you are closer to the truth, you feel you can do a lot of shit to people who you think they're farther away from the truth. To the Sane Society. You're about to go to nuclear war because of, again, my God is the best God. The whole concept the whole concept of God came about in order to produce a more cohesive society. The big guy watching. But now then the God morphs into, you know, my God is better than your God is certainly better than anybody who doesn't believe in my God. So yeah, it's a and I who I blame for this, who I blame for rise of religion, religion as a cure all. Religion is a cure-all. Snake oil salesman whose snake oils cures anything from a brain tumor to a black toe. This is God. This is a snake oil that cures everything. All you have to do is pray and problem solved. I blame the rise of this kind, and everybody has got one, as I said before. Muhammad and Jesus and Moses. Oh, they all have their own God. And they all what they share is this. And but the problem is that concept of God eventually morphs into, when it comes with for when it comes time for tribal encounters, that God becomes another, crutch in order to push farther towards war. And George W. Bush apparently used that crutch effectively with Mr. Tony Blair with regards to second Iraq War. He made a Christian reference to his brother across the pounds. So we go in there and we take him because we are Christian soldiers. Again, please don't present your God to me as the solution to all the snake oil. Don't, because you can be civil if you're educated enough. If you educate your public like the Norwegians have educated theirs, you don't need to go back to God. Who I blame for going back to God, having to resort back to God in order to bring civility, who I blame is the Mars family, the Walton family, the big boys in the Wall Street, and the BlackRock, and the Goldman, and the State Street, and all these guys who have accumulated wealth for the purpose of accumulating wealth, while the society that could have been much more civil, as civilized as the Norwegian society, has not been created because these guys have not seen any profit in education unless you can make the motherfuckers pay through the nose with student loans. Education is not profitable, so the students, the slaves, have to pay for it themselves because it's not profitable for us. Who's us? The Mars family, the Home Depot family, the Walton family. This is the us who haven't realized that the money should not be going to war to increase their profits. The money should be going towards education, so to be able to create a society, a cohesive society, without having to resort back to God. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I seem pissed off because this story keeps repeating in my life. If you educate your public, you don't have to go back to God. I can assure you, you can have a cohesive society without having to go back to God. But the rich people in your societies don't get that. They rather accumulate money. And many of them, they accumulate money and they give some of this money to the pastors. Joel Austin, love the guy. Such a great speaker, but he's rich people give money to him to push his message. Yes, God is watching. Behave in when you're working in my store for minimum wage, which you barely can feed yourself, much less have a family or educate the children of that family. Forget about that. You don't need that. But remember, God is watching. Don't steal from my store. I'm not paying you enough to have a civilized society down the line based on civility, based because of education. I'm not paying you for that. I'm not going to pay for your education. You go take out a loan for your education, and if you can't take out a loan, you'll remain uncivilized and you have to deal with it. And then the Walton family doesn't realize is that their children have to deal with an uncivilized society because nobody paid for their education. Then the rich decide to, yes, let's invest in some pastors, so the pastors tells these motherfuckers not to steal in our stores. I'm sorry, if you educate them well, pay for that, take less money home, Mr. Bolton family, if you take less money home and more money to the employees, I guess as long as the free education is so not good in terms of, forget about all these cultural stuff which I don't know much about. With regards to general knowledge, history, art, geography, naming them, knowing, can name places, history can name something, can have a organized line of thought about what really happened, or what, at least couple of versions of the history. Nothing. You don't educate as good as the Norwegians educate, then yeah, you rather pay some pastors to bring God into the business, so the poor people understand not to steal from the rich because God is watching. Sure. That's the thing. There's no need for that. No need. Just don't be greedy. These really rich corporations, individuals, and like the guy, owns treasury bills, millions upon this. He's got so much money that he no longer wants to keep his money in the currency form. He wants to turn his money into another piece of paper which earns interest on that interest that accumulated interest. There are some who don't know what they to do with their money. This is the fun. This is the problem. If you don't educate your people out of greed, out of, when I explained the example of chicken and the insect dish in front of her, it's just she eats until literally explodes. Actually, I've seen that in fish that they eat when there's food available. Some fish actually explode. You have fish, you feed them. Some of the fish are stupid enough, that greedy enough, they actually explode. They eat it. Some, very few, but they do. I've seen it. So that's in the animal world. You have to educate out of greed. You have to educate into civility. There is no other way around it. The same way, mother dogs teach their pups how to behave. Hey, if you're my pup, if you want to be around me as the mother dog, you have better behave like this. And it's taught. Behavior is taught. Civility is taught. You move away from teaching civility. You're teaching anything because education is expensive. You move away from that because money well better spent in arms and moving armies around. I guess for somebody, not for the people who are not being educated. For them, education is more important than moving armies around. But then, who cares about them? Rich people apparently like more territory. And by supporting these candidates who are pro-colonialism and pro-war, their only objective, that is the objective of corporation, is growth. Again, and you have taken God out of the picture. At least the very rich people don't believe in God, because you can tell, because they really have returned back to their animalistic instinct of greed. They have returned back to their animalistic instinct of greed. You go back there when you stop believing God and you haven't been educated into civility and understanding the concept of having a cohesive society is only possible if every member of the society is civilized and educated really good, private school for everyone, period. Or some kind of school that is willing to pay intelligent people to teach, or provide some kind of thank God for the internet. Internet has at least done something that, you know, the education system has failed. This concept education system hasn't been able to, install a sense of civility, but pictures don't lie, and when bloody pictures come out of, you know, Ukraine or Palestine, a sense of revulsion comes around, and people do recognize that whatever is happening over there is not really civilized. And how is it that we allow this uncivilized action to take place there in Palestine and Ukraine? And why don't aren't we sitting behind tables and trying to live in two-story buildings instead of fighting over the land? You know, build build density, and you know, again back to my God, this the rich have forgot, have no longer accept that the God, real God is watching. No, no, not much more than their children who accept that there's Santa Claus is real. But even the rich have not been educated to understand that you can only continue in a cohesive society, continue making profits from cohesive society only if money is returned back to the society so the society can educate their young, or else you're not no longer going to have an educated society or civilized society. Educated society, as a result, you're not going to have a civilized society, and then you have to resort back to God, or go to the Chinese way and put up cameras and become God. Again, becoming God, putting up cameras and becoming God takes everything underground. That's the problem with not educating and trying to enforce cohesiveness, is resorting back to God, and then on top of that, when the technology is available, resorting back to technology in order to keep an eye on people. There's a way out of that. You educate your people and they behave well. The Norwegian didn't have the all watching eye when I was there, and they still behaved very well. They didn't have the technological all watching eye, and they didn't have the spiritual all watching eye, all watching God, and they still were doing very well. Thank you very much. And please don't tell me this race can't learn or that race can't learn. No, 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 no. This is not a racial thing. It's, you know, Obama was half black. It's black culture has had many, 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 many scientists and intelligent people. So especially, those from Africa, who haven't been, you know, tortured into, you know, genetically they haven't been tortured. They have many, many scientists and many intelligent people. I met some of them. So this whole idea that no, we can't educate it, it's a waste of money, and No, you can't. You can't. You can't. But you know, you're overworking their parents because two incomes are necessary. Why two incomes are necessary? Because Mr. Jeff Bezos is making 2,000 times more than his night watchman at one of his factories. That's why that not night watchman cannot educate his children properly. As long as good education is not provided free by the government, as long as that is not available, then he has to pay for it, and he can't pay for it because Jeff Bezos has got his share of the pie is 2,000 times more than his share of the pie, 50,000 times more than his share of the pie. But then later on, Jeff Bezos' children have to live in the same streets as this guy whose children was education was neglected because he was Jeff Bezos' night watchman, and he didn't make enough to educate his children. Now the children of these two have to live in the same cities? Are you kidding me? Of course you have to go back to God. Because 90% of society have not been, educated well. Who can afford a private education? Not the average folks. How is the public education? Well, it leaves a lot to be desired. Why? How you can tell? Uh, from the results. The results is a little sad, actually. You don't feel the life. You see a lot of protection, a lot of overprotecting, but not much life. Life in terms of, joy, the whole joy they talk about. I'm not sure if it's there, and it's not there. My view is basically because the despair when you see, you know, super yachts, and there is no way in hell you can get that, and your children are also not getting educated because there is a concept called the super yacht. That's why your children are not getting educated because there's a super yacht, and that added productivity has been spent on inventing very sophisticated technology for a super yacht and not educating the masses. Then you have to, in order to bring stability, you have to go back to God. Personally, I like the Norwegian model much better, but of course, I stand out like a sore thumb in Norway. So the concept of what they have done is good. So I think that should be replicated. What that means is, okay, you want to have these monopolies such as Walmart and Chevron and, Exxon and Halliburton. You want to have these monopolies, big corporations. Fine. How the education of people, continuous, lifelong education of your people, how is this going to be financed, paid for? Because it's certainly they don't match having a super yacht the size of a super tanker and not having the masses educated. You're gonna have a problematic results. not a cohesive society, let's put it that way. And then you have to go through all kind of mayhem, and then eventually it's going to be some draconian government taking over. Then I'm probably on the first casualty list, and it's not a good scene. But then when you neglect education for ages, and George W. Bush becomes the leader who's not really educated, and whatever little education he has to downplay even that in order to appeal to the masses who are not very well educated. And to the point that Donald Trump comes out and in order to appeal to masses says that, I love the uneducated, undereducated. I love them. It's like, well, if you're undereducated, you know it most of the time. And in order to appeal to masses, if you have to say I love the uneducated, and that makes a lot of people happy, yeah, I understand why it makes them happy, because Jeff Bezos was not willing to share his pie, a portion of his pie, in order to educate his fellow man. So now, somebody else has to come and bring God back into the society in order to make the society run better, a little more cohesive. And then and eventually somebody's going to come and say, yes, this God is on our side, and we're going to, we are on closer to right than those other guys, because those other guys don't believe in our God. And eventually that God becomes a metaphor for our penis. Our penis is the best penis because we believe in this specific God. We are the best, we are closer to the truth, and whatever nasty thing we do to those guys is okay because they're farther away from the truth. Because they don't believe in our God. Or they don't believe in any God. Of course they're farther away from the truth. You don't have to go through this again. You didn't have to if you had spent some money on education instead of warfare. Proportionally, see how much Norway's expenditure is on education. Proportionally, you have to spend as much. How much Norway's expenditure on education, how much Norway is spending money on education, and you do a proportional investment. In all the countries that you have problem, that is, North America, Central America, Western Europe, just see what the Norwegian numbers are and replicate it. But the thing is, the funny thing is, the North Americans, Uncle Sam's managers, are telling the Europeans that no, you don't understand. You should spend less money on education and more money in defense, because as some kind of obligation towards NATO. The guys who are not spending very little money on education, as that's the Trump line, right? Harris line is fine. The Harris line is, we protect Europe, no problem, as long as the Europeans give us political shield. As long as we can call on the European when we want to say, no, it's not just us, it's our coalition. As long as they give us political cover, we will do the heavy lifting. That's the Harris position. Heavy lifting is basically we're going to spend our money in order to conquer new land. We're not going to spend our money on educating our public. The Trump line is that, no, we do expand, no problem, we love colonialism. It's just that those, coalition has to put more money in war business. So the Europeans, the Norwegians, who have spent so much money on education, and they have reached the point in their civilization that without without emphasis on God and presence of God, without that, their society is living in a very cohesive manner, and there is not much crime, and everything is working okay, and people are nice to each other. Without emphasis on God, they are like that because they have been civilized very well and very well invested in their education. Because the result speaks for themselves. You do the same in England, in France, but that hasn't happened, has it? In North America, certainly hasn't happened. The countries that spend more on defense have to spend less on education because there's just not much, the money is not there. Uncle Sam has been an exception, but still, with being exception as the reserve currency of the world, Uncle Sam's managers had this golden opportunity to be just the education mecca of the world, just in terms of just education for everybody. So you don't have to go back to God to bring some kind of civility in the society. But no, missed the opportunity. You're fighting for somebody's right to exist. You know, there are these ant farms. You're spending money instead of your education of your tribe, so it can be civilized and live cohesively without having to resort back to God. Instead of that, you're investing money in the right of the Taiwanese to be run by a group of people that you approve of, and not by a group of people you don't approve of. That's really right, comes down to it. The Taiwanese are much more, is not, the Taiwanese are not any less corrupt than the Chinese, or a much better run than the Chinese model. If we are talking about quality of life and all of that, they're doing both. They're doing well, and the Chinese, many would say the Chinese are doing a much better job of providing quality life for their citizens. So what's the problem? So if China takes over Taiwan and continues providing with that level of quality life that it's providing for its own citizens, what's the problem with that? The idea is not who's ruling or how it's being ruled. The idea is can provide quality life. The Ukrainians who have died didn't care who's providing quality life, but they were persuaded that no, we can provide a better quality life than they can. What happened there? Ukrainians started attacking the Russians that were living by instigation of the British. Ukrainians started attacking the Russian, bringing their quality of life down. Then the Russian neighbors fought back, bringing their quality of life, the other side's quality of life down. And now, continuously back and forth, they're bringing the quality of life down for each other. Who's winning? A few people in the West who are building those weapons and selling them to them. Only people are winning. The question is, can the Russians bring quality of life to that part? Okay, fine, let the Russians bring quality of life to that part. It's the problem was the North Americans the British especially convinced the Ukrainians to start giving a hard time to the Russians in their own borders, or persuade the rest of the country, i.e., to persuade the rest of the country to become more Anglo friendly, Anglo Saxon friendly, as opposed to Slav friendly. I think this is just madness. The British want to get rid of a bunch of these uneducated people that they have raised. They haven't invested money in education. They have invested money in, to increase their money. They have invested wealth to increase their wealth. That's the British upper class. And every 50 years or so, 75 years or so, 100 years or so, the British have a lot of uneducated people that they want to get rid of. So they start a war and get rid of all these people that they have failed to educate. Those people who failed to go to Oxford or Cambridge go die in the front line. This is the casualty of greed on your planet. Casualty of war or casualty of greed. And greed only comes in through lack of education. So even the Walton family is not educated well. Even the likes of the top 100 richest people in North America, they're not educated well. If they were, they would have recognized the folly of their way. They would have recognized how wrong they are in accumulating wealth and forcing the slaves to educate themselves by going through debt, going into debt. And, you know, then now, Marie Antoinette has to deal with a lot of uncivilized poor people. Good luck.